you for joining us. Again, my name is Lori Barr. I'm the co-founder of Raise the Barr, a nonprofit organization that was founded to provide support to single-parent students and their children through education. We've created this 5-part webinar series specifically for student parents who are in the process of transferring or thinking about transferring from a 2-year to a 4-year school. We hope that this information will provide you, a toolkit that you can use as you're trying to make decisions or navigate that process. And so you can attain your ultimate goal of receiving your 4-year degree. Before we get started, let's just cover a couple housekeeping items. First, you can submit any questions that you have or chat using the features at the bottom of your screen. We will be collecting the questions throughout the webinar and taking some time near the end to answer those questions. And if you have any specific questions or problems, you can use the chat function or raise your hand. We do have somebody monitoring that feature today as well. Also, this specific PowerPoint will be available on our website after the webinar today, as well as a recording. So for anybody who is accessing this at a later time, this webinar, along with the 2 previous that we've had and the 2 that will come after this, they're all on our website under the Transfer Series tab. Finally, you will receive a follow-up email tomorrow, just thanking you for joining us, and you'll have another option to submit any questions that you have. And so, we'll do our best to answer those questions, and if we don't have answers, we'll find them for you and get back to you. And also at our website, you can contact any member of our team if you, have specific questions or want to communicate with us individually. You can do that. And you can find us at our website. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, I'm the co-founder and executive director of Raise the Barr. I have 20+ years experience in education. I started out as a resource specialist providing learning strategies and instructional support for students with disabilities who had IEPs, 504 plans. I was then a guidance counselor, so I have a lot of experience in helping with the process of planning for college in a more traditional sense, straight out of high school. I was also a high school principal, a director of schools for a charter school consortium, and then I was part founder of the College Bridge Academy and alternative high school for adult learners. And now I am the executive director of Raise the Barr. And I'm so happy to introduce our co-presenter today. I'm honored to have her join us, Denise Thomas. Denise, you're on mute.
All right, you think I'd have that down by now after a 1.5 years of webinars. But as I was saying, I just want to thank Lori and the team at Raise the Barr for having me here today. As Lori mentioned, my name is Denise Thomas, and I am the program director at an organization called Family Scholar House in Louisville, Kentucky. And part of my responsibility as a program director is to work with our program staff, specifically with our academic coaches. And what we do as an organization is we provide wraparound services for single parents who are enrolled in an education or training program. And those services include our residential program, so that includes housing and whatever needs they have as they're working toward their goal of earning a degree. So that's my current role. And then prior to that, I worked in higher education for a number of years in enrollment management, where I managed a team of admissions professionals and did all the things that are involved in enrollment management, admissions, some financial aid. And I'm just happy to be here, and I'm honored that you're here today to listen to this presentation. So with that, we'll go into the items that we're going to cover today. Of course, at the top of the list is the FAFSA, and I'll talk a little bit more about why it's at the top of the list when we get to that portion of the program. We'll talk about choosing a school and what factors go into that. And a big part of that is the cost and how that works with financial aid. And then how are you going to pay for school? What are the different sources of funding that are available to you, whether that's in grants, loans, scholarships, your own personal contribution to education. So we'll just have a conversation around that. And then we'll talk about financial aid clocks, because the federal government doesn't give you forever to complete your degree. There are certain restrictions on time limits on that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then talk a bit about student loans and what they are, repayment options, the different types of student loans that are available, and the pros and cons of taking out loans. And then finally, we'll go over a few tips that we've learned along the way, Lori and I, and we'll go into Q&A. So with that, let's go to the FAFSA. Like I said, because it all starts there. For those of you who may have heard the term FAFSA, and we kind of throw that around, and really, what does that mean? What does FAFSA stand for? Well, it's the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And I like to say that because I want to put the emphasis on free. There are lots of organizations, or there are websites out there that you can go to that will want to charge you to complete your FAFSA. And I just want to say that there is no reason under any circumstances should you pay to complete a FAFSA. The FAFSA is available online, and you can access it through FAFSA.gov, not FAFSA.com, FAFSA.gov. So with that, what is the FAFSA? Oh, can we go back just a little bit? I just want to talk about when you should fill it out. This is important. The FAFSA opens up every October 1st for the next academic year. So for example, if you are planning on starting school in the fall, July, August timeframe, you could have completed your FAFSA as early as October 1st of 2020. Okay, so as we're coming up on October of 2021, you would fill out your FAFSA for the following July, August 2022. And the reason why you want to go ahead and fill out your FAFSA as early as possible is because certain types of funding will run out. And the earliest you have your FAFSA in, the better the chance is that you'll have access to some of those sources of funding that may run out. And then the other thing I want to say to you guys is, even if you're not totally sure that you're going to be attending school, even if you're still in the process of trying to figure that out, go ahead and complete your FAFSA anyway. Okay, because it's there. You got it in on time. And, you know, applying for FAFSA does not obligate you to take the funding. It's just a placeholder so that if you do decide to go to school, it's already done. So, ready for the next slide. So with that said, are you eligible for aid? And there's several factors that go into that. The first is at the top of the graphic here. Do I have a financial need? There are some sources of funding out there that require that you have what they call a financial need, and it's based on income and levels of income. There are certain types of financial aid that don't require a level of need, and those are mainly your loan programs. But if you're looking at Pell Grants, scholarships, things like that, for sure the Pell Grant is going to be based on a financial need. The second item you want to consider is, am I a citizen or an eligible non-citizen? In order to qualify for federal aid, You must be a US citizen and have a valid Social Security number. There are a few instances in which non-citizens can apply for federal aid. Citizens who are at refugee status are eligible in some cases, but by and large, you must be a US citizen and have a valid Social Security number in order to apply. And you also must be either enrolled or admitted into a school before you can receive aid, before you can receive funding. And if you are a male, you must register with Selective Service, otherwise known as the draft. So, and you must do it when you turn 18. So if those 5 items are, if you've satisfied all 5 of those items, then you are eligible to apply for some type of aid. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Denise. I do just want to make a comment about our single fathers who are joining us and the Selective Service. I know in my own experience with my younger son, though we knew that was something he had to do when he turned 18, he forgot. And he did receive his financial aid package, but he also received a notice in the mail from the US government, from the Selective Service, reminding him that he needed to fulfill that step. Otherwise, his funding would be pulled. So it's not something that can be ignored. It's just something you have to do. So make sure that at the age of 18, if you are a male, that you register. And so along with the FAFSA, there are some common mistakes that can interfere with a student's ability to receive funding or maximum funding. And so the first thing is to file early. As Denise mentioned, the FAFSA becomes available October 1st. And the sooner you file, the better, because federal dollars will run out. Priority for programs with limited funds, often given to students, are often given to students as soon as it's released. And so there's a 21-month application cycle, meaning that this year, for this academic year, 2021 to 2022, the FAFSA deadline for the form that was released in October is June 30th of 2022. So during that time period, you want to file, but the sooner the better. And there are different deadlines for federal, state, and for your institution. So the FAFSA, when we're speaking about the FAFSA, that's federal dollars. State deadlines are different, depending on where you reside. So make sure that you look that up. So for the state of California, that could affect your the California Dream Act dollars, the Cal Grant dollars. In the state of Minnesota, it could impact your state aid, your Minnesota post-secondary childcare grant. And then institution by institution, they may have their own deadlines. So if there are specific institutions that you want to apply to, you should look early at what their financial aid packages are and their deadlines are. And then also missing information. This is really something that's very common, but that you want to pay close attention to. So if your FAFSA is incomplete, it won't be processed. If you don't provide a signature, it won't be processed. If you don't have a federal student ID, it won't be processed. If there could be a delay if you don't use the IRS retrieval tool, meaning how to get access to your tax documents that you have to provide. Typically, if you're a dependent student, it's for a parent, but as an independent adult student, if you have filed taxes, there's just a quick, easy button that you can access to retrieve that. And so your package just happens, to get collected easily and then sent in to the Student Aid Commission. And so you want to pay close attention to, crossing all the T's, dotting all the I's, and really ultimately making sure that you sign that application so your application can get processed quickly. Choosing a school is really an important part of, it goes hand in hand with your financial aid. And I thought it was interesting to find that of about over 41,000 people who were surveyed, almost half of those said that the number one reason for choosing a school was the cost. But I'm here to say that I'm a grumpy cat, and that's why that picture is right there. No, that should not be the number one factor in deciding where to attend. You should really consider your options. Don't let the cost of an institution deter you from attending. There are three options that we're going to cover today. And those include a public option, a private option, and a for-profit option. And so just to give some examples of public schools, because not everybody is aware of this, it may seem common to some, but it's not to others. In California, public schools would include schools like UCLA, Cal Berkeley, and also the Cal State schools such as Cal State Northridge, Cal State Long Beach, Cal State LA, schools like that. I just want to touch briefly on the difference between a UC school and a Cal State school, because they are two different systems here in the state of California. There is a significant cost difference to the schools. The UCs tend to be more expensive than the Cal State schools. The other main differences typically are the courses of study. UCs typically are much larger and mainly focused on research and theory. And they're really preparing you for postgraduate work, so after you earn a degree. Whereas with a Cal State school, they're really preparing you to enter a career or the workforce as soon as you graduate or earn your degree. They tend to be more student-centered and a little bit smaller in size. And they focus on non-research oriented careers. So that's the main difference. You could argue probably with folks until the day ends about which is better in terms of quality or reputation, status. But really, it just depends on what suits you and what your postgraduate plans are. In the state of Minnesota, the two different systems are the University of Minnesota public systems, excuse me, are the University of Minnesota and Minnesota State. And so you have the University of Minnesota, which would be campuses like in the Twin Cities, in Duluth, and then you have the state system, which would include St. Cloud, Mankato State, schools like that. In my research, I was looking to see if I could come up with the difference between the two, the University of Minnesota system and the state system. And I really wasn't able to find anything. We do have a member of our team who, two members of our team who are both at universities in the state of Minnesota. So if there are questions about that, you could ask those and perhaps they could answer that for you. Other public universities just across the country, to give you an idea, would be like the University of Kentucky, Penn State, Arizona State University, all public schools. And then we have the private schools. And you can see just at the end of the list there that the dollar signs increase, because typically private schools are more expensive to attend than public schools. And I'll go into that a little bit more later. But some private schools examples in the state of California would include the University of Southern California, Loyola Marymount University, Pepperdine University, Stanford. And in the state of Minnesota, some examples would be St. Catherine's, St. Thomas, Herzig University. Others across the country would include Duke, Baylor, Gonzaga, all private schools. And then lastly, for-profit. And some examples of for-profit schools include Capella, DeVry, Strayer, Bellarmine. And I didn't want to exclude for-profit schools, but because I think it's an important thing to talk about. They are an option. And while they typically get a bad rap, they can be good options for working adults. They are for-profit in that they're institutions that are owned and operated by a private company, private corporation that is profit seeking. The less reputable of for-profit schools often make a lot of headlines for their high rates of debt creation and for promising students a career advancing education that kind of ends up falling flat. And so though, you know, I think generally folks would say we'll steer clear of for-profit schools. The recommendation here is just to do your homework, do all of your research and make a well-informed decision. Don't listen to, empty promises or, the idea that, well, we ensure that you'll have a career as soon as you're, earning your degree. Really just do your homework to make sure that you're making the best decision for you and for your family. I really just want to dig into the difference between public and private a little bit further. And so you can see here in the Venn diagram, the lighter shade green are the individual public and private, and then the darker is what they have in common. And so both public institutions and private institutions, federal financial aid can be applied, and that we'll go into what that is in just a minute. But you can use federal financial aid at either a public or a private institution. The difference for public schools is that public schools are funded by the state and by tuition dollars. The cost of attending, they tend to be affordable options as compared to private schools. Affordable is, for you and I probably doesn't mean, $30,000 a year doesn't seem affordable, but as compared to a private school, it is more they tend to be less expensive. The school aid offering tends to be lower and the student population tends to be higher. These are broad generalizations, so just something to keep in mind. For private schools are funded by donors, endowments, but also tuition dollars. The cost of attending as compared to a private school tends to be higher. But the school aid tends to be higher also. And so, for example, a school like St. Catherine's in the Twin Cities, they are more expensive. Their tuition is more expensive than, say, University of Minnesota, but they also tend to, generally speaking, have more generous financial aid offerings and packages because of their, they have endowments and they have donors that set aside specific dollars for incoming students. And so if you're trying to compare them, it's not really a fair comparison. It really, the suggestion would be to apply to both and see what type of package you get from both and see what suits your needs. Also with private schools, they tend to have smaller student populations.
Thank you, Lori. Okay, so how do I pay for school? So we're going to look at different types of financial aid and different options and pools of money and how to get tuition paid. Well, first we're going to file the FAFSA. So we've already talked about that. We've talked about what the FAFSA, what the acronym stands for. We've talked about deadlines and all those things. So let's talk about when you complete the FAFSA, what types of aid are you applying for? The first type is the grant or grants. But mainly what we're talking about when we're talking about federal grants is we're talking about the Pell Grant. And the Pell Grant is need-based. It's based on financial need, the amount of money that, the amount of income that you make, versus the amount of tuition for this institution that you're planning to attend. The Pell Grant, however, is not unlimited. The maximum amount that participants or students can receive in a Pell Grant is $6,200 per year. Okay, so even if you qualify for full Pell, depending on what institution you choose, it may not cover the full cost of tuition. Okay, so say you're going to a school where tuition is $10,000 per year and you qualify for full Pell. You're going to get $6,200 under full Pell, but then you're going to have that shortfall there. So let's look at some ways in which other alternative ways in getting in funding. The second bullet there refers to scholarships. And scholarships are also a form of free money. And there are all kinds of scholarships out there. And there are different entities that award scholarships. So you're talking, the different entities might be, for example, an institutional scholarship. So your college or university may offer scholarships, and typically you'll see that in the form of a transfer scholarship. So if you're a student who's transferring from a junior college or community college and going into a four-year school, there's usually a pot of money available there. There's a freshman scholarship sometimes that is offered to participants. And those two scholarships are generally academic scholarships as well. So they may have GPA requirements tied to them. And then there are certain academic programs or departments within a university that may offer scholarships, particularly those in the STEM fields. So if you're, for example, a nursing student, there may be a scholarship at U of L, University of Louisville, for nursing students. So, so you've got degree-specific scholarships. And then there are community scholarships. So there are community organizations that award scholarships. Churches award scholarships, professional organizations award scholarships. So I use myself as an example. I was a business major in undergrad, and I received a scholarship through the National Black MBA Association. It was a $2,500 scholarship. And so there are accounting associations, all kinds of different professional organizations that award scholarships. You may have to do a little legwork in finding some of these scholarships, but it's definitely, and you may have to write an essay, or there will be some other requirements for application, but they are definitely worth looking into. So we've talked about grants and scholarships. So those are pots of free money. Now we're talking about loans. And when you're talking about federal loans, that is the Stafford Loan Program. And there are two types of Stafford loan. There's the subsidized loan under Stafford, and there's the unsubsidized loan under Stafford. And basically the difference in the loan is that under subsidized, the government pays a portion of your interest. So they pay the interest while interest is accumulating on your loans while you're in school, right? But under the subsidized program, the government is paying the interest on your loan while you're in school and through your 6-month deferment period after you've graduated. So you get a little bit of a break on the subsidized loan. But the maximum amount that you can borrow under Stafford as an undergraduate student is $57,500 a year. So you want to think about that when you are considering schools, because $57,500 is the limit that you can borrow as an undergrad. And then the final category here is work study. And that is when you are given a job on campus in one of maybe the academic offices or one of the athletic facility, but you're working on campus and it's typically minimum wage, but the dollars are there, you're paid, and that pay is designed to offset some of your costs. Maybe it will help you with your books, some of the activity fees and things like that. But work study is certainly a way to supplement your aid package. Um, the final bullet there is, and I wish I had known about this when I was considering an undergrad program, learn what schools are on the meet need list. And these are schools that in various different ways are committed to covering 100% of your cost. Okay, and so definitely worth a look. There are some that offer to offset the cost without you having to take out student loans to do it. And we'll talk a little bit more about those schools a little bit later in the presentation, but there are schools out there where you can attend and not incur debt and have your costs fully covered. Okay, so as we talk about the different pools of money that are available to you, there is a difference between the federal pool of money, the state pool of money, and the institutional. So again, just to reiterate, under federal, you're looking at Pell Grant. And the wonderful thing about Pell Grant funding is that it's free dollars. You don't have to pay it back. And the only thing to consider, though, is that it is need-based. So not everyone who fills out the FAFSA qualifies for the Pell. The federal loan program or the Stafford loan program is an option as well, but you have to consider that it is a loan and you must repay it after you complete your degree. And we're going to talk about repayment and various different repayment plans as we a little bit later in the presentation. And then there are certain state grants that are available to students, and a few of them are listed here. The Cal grant and the Minnesota State grant. So those are all grants, again, free money. You don't have to worry about paying those back. And then work study is under state funding as well. And remember, work study is where you are given a job on campus and you're working to make money to offset costs. And then again, going into the institutional dollars that are out there, each school has a pot of money that they can award students. Some of it is academic based on academics, like transfer scholarships and your freshman scholarships. Others are, again, departmental scholarships, but it is definitely worth considering. You may have to do a little bit of legwork, especially to find those departmental scholarships. And so as we were talking a couple of slides back about the meet needs schools, there are three categories of those. And meet needs schools, once again, are those schools that offer to pay 100% of students' tuition. And there are varying ways that they do that. The best of the best of those, and that's at the top of the list, those are the schools that have the most generous financial aid packages. They are willing to pay 100% of your financial need without you having to take out student loans to do it. And that's regardless of your family income. And then the second best are schools where they'll meet 100% of your financial need, no matter what your family's income or your income is. But if your income is below a certain level, they won't require you to take out loans. So if your income is higher than what they consider financial need, you may have to take out some loans to meet that 100%. But it's still a great option because you don't have to come out of pocket during the time that you're in school. And then the third category of the meet needs school is one where 100% of your need is covered through loans. But the good thing about that, again, is that you're not coming out of pocket with funding. So let's talk about what happens if you are given a financial aid package that's not quite enough to cover your costs. Um, you can appeal or negotiate. Um, doesn't mean that it's always going to happen for you, but you definitely have the ability and the right to go in and try to negotiate a better financial aid package. So let's talk about what that might look like. The first thing you want to do, if you get your award and you think that there's a mistake, you definitely want to go back in and check your FAFSA and make sure that you filled it out. You didn't put in an extra zero on your salary, or there wasn't some kind of error there. So you want to check out your FAFSA first, and make sure that that was completed correctly. Then next, if there were any changes in your financial situation between the, if there have been changes in your life since you completed your FAFSA back in October, say you have another dependent, you had a baby, or you lost your job, or you lost wages, or your pay was cut because of COVID, you want to let your financial aid department know that your situation and your circumstances have changed since you initially filled out your FAFSA, and they will take that into consideration. Okay. And then you also want to let another thing you can do is just let your school know that the package isn't quite what you need or what you expected. Let them know that you definitely want to attend their school, but you may not be able to with the package that you're being given. And to ask if there's anything else that they can do. Ask your financial aid department if there is any other pool of money that they can pull from to help you out. And then you can always, play hardball and let them know that there's another school that's giving you a better package. You guys are my first choice, but I've got this other package here that looks better for me. Is there anything that you can do to get me more dollars? And then lastly, not all schools will negotiate or reconsider, but just keep trying. Like I said, the worst they could do is say, no, we can't help you, but you will never know if you don't try to negotiate that. Okay, I think Lori, I'll let you take the next slide.
Just to the point about negotiating and appealing, one of our student parent advisors shared that she appealed her financial aid package several times when she was attending UCLA. And so if there are specific questions about how she did that, or what she said or what she did, you can reach out to us and I could make a connection for you. So maybe she can give some insight on how she was able to get a package that met her needs and helped her attend and stay enrolled at UCLA. So the question often comes up, is there any specific financial aid for student parents? And so the short answer is no. But there's a little bit more to that. So there aren't any like specific, federal programs or specific state programs that you could apply to. But you should look to see what your state and your institution offers. For example, in the state of Minnesota, they offer the Minnesota Post-Secondary Child Care Grant, and that helps low-income students pay for childcare. They must be a resident of the state of Minnesota and enrolled in at least 6 to 15 units per term. The award is up to $5,500 per child per year. And I believe that there is a time clock on that. And so that's available to student parents who are in the state. And just, throw in the search bar, Minnesota Post-Secondary Child Care Grant, and you can get information there. Or if you're already enrolled at your institution, you can speak to somebody in your financial aid office about that. Also, if you're looking at this PowerPoint later, you can click on the link here and it will take you to more information. Here in the state of California, there is the Cal Grant, which the governor recently added to the budget additional dollars for the Cal Grant B, and those dollars were specific to an additional $6,000 from the base Cal Grant to student parents. And so those additional dollars do certainly help if you are a parenting student. And so you want to make sure that you are applying for those dollars if you're here in the state. And then something else you also want to consider is the family housing. Depending on your campus, family housing is typically intended for graduate students or professors who might be, teaching for a short period of time, but also for students with dependents and students that have families. And so not every institution has that offering, but we've included here a link to the best colleges for students with children. And that was put together by IWPR, the Institute for Women's Policy and Research. And on that list includes St. Catherine's out of the University of Minnesota. Out of the state of Minnesota. And so you may want to access this link later just to look at what are the best campuses for students with dependents and for family housing. You also probably want to consider if there is campus childcare available and there's not a 4-year wait list, which you won't even be able to access while you're attending. And then what types of family-friendly spaces are available on your campus? That's something else you want to take into consideration. And then finally, look for scholarships. So as Denise said, this is free money. And one of the best sources for scholarships and information for student parents is Raise the Barr. We provide scholarships to single parent students in the states of California and in Minnesota. You also want to keep in mind that there is a time frame for which to have financial aid available to you. And so typically kind of the standard equation is if you're pursuing a four-year degree, you have 6 years to do that, at which time your financial aid time clock ends. This is a general time frame, but it's something that you should keep in mind, especially for students who are transferring from a community college to a 4-year program, because you may have spent, as an adult student, you may have spent several years earning some credits at community colleges, and all of that accrues, that adds up. And what is known to be a fact is that students with dependents end up running out of time and financial aid as they near the end of their program, which causes either them to stop attending or take out loans to fund their education. And so you just want to kind of keep in mind that time clock. You have to maintain satisfactory academic progress. The acronym is SAP. By federal law and regulations, colleges use this satisfactory academic progress as kind of their measuring stick as to when they'll end their financial aid. And so basically the time frame is 150% of the normal time frame for a program. After violating the 150% maximum time frame, a student is no longer eligible for federal student aid or institutional aid. You can appeal that. You can, depending on certain life circumstances, you can appeal that just like you can your financial aid package, but the institution and the state and the government has the right to refuse and to say no. And so it's best just to pay close attention to that time clock.
Okay. Just like with any major decision, there are pros and there are cons. So when you're looking at student loans, you definitely should be aware and make a list of all the pros and cons. Should I or shouldn't I? And so let's start with the pros. The pros are it's a loan, right? But if you look at it as though it were, it's an investment on your future, that's a way that you can look at it. I mean, if that is the only way that you can afford school, it's definitely worth a look at because it is an investment. There is data out there that shows that your lifetime potential for earning with a college degree versus without one um, is um, um, is extremely high. So you definitely want to look at that as an investment. It helps you to afford school. Like I said, if that is the only way that you could afford to go back to school or to start school, it's definitely worth a look at. And because it's a loan, if you make your payments on time, it could help you build credit. So those are some of the pros. There are others, but those are the top three. And then as you're looking at cons, obviously, it's again, I keep saying it's a loan because it is. I want you guys to remember that. But you're starting out after school, after you've graduated, you're starting out life after graduation in debt because you've got that loan hanging out there. Um, and paying off student loans kind of takes away from your discretionary income. So it's taking money from maybe you're not going to get, maybe you're going to put off buying a car, or maybe you're going to stay at home a little bit longer because, like I said, you won't have as much discretionary income. And it could impact the ability for the student to borrow money, just because they're looking at lenders are oftentimes looking at debt to income ratios when they're considering loaning money. And then filing for bankruptcy is not an option. That student loan never goes away. So if you owe the federal government money, it's always going to be there. So those are the things to consider when you're looking at whether or not you should take out a loan. So with that being said, let's talk about some options for when you're in repayment and you are running into difficulty making your payments. There are options for you. And I love this slide because when I go back to my experience in undergrad and going into repayment, I did not know about these options. But the federal government is doing a much better job in educating individuals on these different areas when they are considering taking out a loan. So let's start at the top there with deferment. A financial aid deferment is what you can take out to delay your payments while you're enrolled in school. So for example, if you're finishing up your undergrad degree, you've graduated, and you decide to go on and enroll in a master's program. You can fill out deferment form saying that you are in school still, and that way you will not be required to start making payments until after 6 months after you've graduated from your graduate program. Forbearance. That is something to consider if during the time that you're in repayment, you run into some financial hardship, whether it's medical bills, you lose your job, your pay is cut, whatever the financial hardship is, you can go into what they call forbearance and you apply for it. I believe you can find those documents online. And you apply for forbearance. The decision is made pretty quickly, and what it does is it suspends your payments for a period of time. So say you can request a 6-month forbearance or a 12-month forbearance, and it will suspend your payments, and without it negatively impacting your credit, it just puts your loan back at current. And then finally, there is forgiveness. And forgiveness is given when you are employed in certain industries. So if you're, for example, teaching in an impoverished area or low income area, some types of public service, are qualified for forgiveness. So just look into that. You have to make a certain number of consecutive payments to your loan. And then after a period of time, the Department of Education will forgive the balance of the loan. So those are all ways in which you can put your payments on hold or gain forgiveness altogether when you're in repayment. Okay, Lori, I'm going to let you talk about planning ahead.
Yep. So finally, as you are planning for your transfer from your community college experience to the four-year school, you just want to keep in mind what we've covered here. Consider all of the school options, know what the cost is, explore the financial aid options, and exhaust every avenue there. It does take a little bit of time, but it is well worth it. Think about the cost of living and the cost of attendance. So everything, including your rent or room and board, your food, transportation, childcare, your utilities costs, everything that you will have to come out of pocket for, and what it's going to take for you to be able to attend school while raising your child and providing a home and basic needs for your child. And then start thinking about life after college. And that will be a follow-up webinar to this particular one, where we will go a little bit deeper into how you connect the dots from community college through your 4-year and then living post-graduation. We obviously did not have enough time in this webinar to cover everything in depth, but this was just intended to give you just some starting points as you plan for that transfer. You can refer back to this PowerPoint and this webinar later, where you can access resources that we've put together here for you. For scholarship and financial aid, there are some links here, basically with the student aid, career stop, scholarshipy. You can get lists of financial aid options that are available to you. Again, information here at raisethebar.org. And then additional videos, if you're like me and you just get to, like to, access just quick videos that give you some information in like a 5 or 6, minute snapshot, you can access that information here: basic general information, how to negotiate your package, what I wish I knew, so some tips, and then schools that give the meet need or the need blind aid that Denise was speaking about. They're listed here as well. And so with that, we'll jump into our Q&A. We only have a few minutes left, so I hope we don't have a long list, otherwise we'll have to email answers.
So one question we had for Denise: if a student parent doesn't qualify for the Pell Grant, will they still qualify for state grants?
That is a good question. It varies from state to state, but you should not automatically rule yourself out for a state grant because you did not qualify for federal Pell Grant, because they could have different qualifications, and it varies from state to state. So you will not necessarily be denied state grant funding.
Okay, thank you. One more: would you recommend work study instead of an off-campus job?
I'll take that one. So I think it really depends on what's going to work for you and for your family. Again, referring back to one of our student parent advisors, Brenda, she spoke about taking work study on campus. And what that did to help her was it reduced her commute time. She was able to work and then schedule her classes around her work time. And so that made it easier for her to be able to, kind of be in one spot to do things like go to school, eat, work, study, and, everything in between. And so it really depends on you and what your family needs. If you need a job where you're earning a little bit more, then perhaps you look outside of campus. But if work study suits your needs for timing, then I would say definitely consider that.
I agree with that. And I also think that working on campus, your employer, your boss might be a little bit more forgiving of your school schedule and your home life schedule. So if you are a student parent, that's something to consider as well.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I just want to, before we close, remind you that we have 2 more webinars upcoming. Will be this Friday, and that webinar's topic will be on balancing time, parenting, and being a student. And that will air live at noon Central Time. That would be 1 p.m. Eastern Time and 10 a.m. Pacific Time. So we got all the time zones covered, and you can register using the link here, or you can find more information on our website and register there as well. And then finally, we'll end on May 3rd with a student panel with our expert on building social capital. And so we're excited for those 2 upcoming webinars. And again, I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you, Denise, for joining us and lending your expert advice and your insight. We hope that you gain some valuable information. If you have any further questions, you can contact us using the contact information at our website. And we look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. Thank you.